Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of my Bigfoot sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of run-down no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
If you'd like to be able to listen to the show without ads and have full access to bonus content, that's an option. To find out how, please go to mybigfootsighting.com.
My Bigfoot sighting happened about a half mile from my family farm. It was about 147 acres. It was about half wooded, half farmland. I just remember growing up, I was interacting with something. My bedroom was on the second floor. There was a tree outside of my window, but it wasn't a tree that you could climb. There was no limbs or anything anybody could climb. It just went straight up. And I would find rocks on my windowsill, or a turtle, a baby squirrel that fell out of a nest. It was gifts all the time on my windowsill. And I just remember getting in trouble from my parents, because I was bringing wildlife into the house. Because I would keep them as pets in my bedroom. And then in return, I would leave things on the windowsill and they would come up missing, like little trinkets, Legos. I remember leaving one of those G.I. Joe Lady Jane figures, and it would come up missing, but then I would find it out in the woods later on. And we were very strong Catholic. My parents didn't believe in TV or anything. I was allowed to watch a half hour of TV a week. So the only thing I could think of that it was a spirit or a ghost, because that's all I knew about. So it was a lot of little things like that happening. I have one experience that I can recall. I was probably around 8 years old, and I had my favorite tree that I would go and read under. There was no kids around for me to play with, so I spent a lot of time by myself out in the woods or around the animals that we raised. And I was sitting under this tree, and I knew something was around me, but I never saw anything. And then all of a sudden, stones were getting thrown at me. Apples were getting thrown at me because there was an apple tree. Then a large limb came at me. And that's the first time I ever felt aggression from whatever it was I was experiencing. And I remember getting all upset. I was still a young girl. And I was crying, and I ran to my dad, and I'm like, they're being mean to me, and they thought I had an imaginary friend, So, of course, looking back, I don't know why he did this, but he grabbed his shotgun, and he was like, well, show me where you were out in the woods. And when we went out there, he climbed that tree, and it was hollow inside, and I live in northern Indiana. The biggest animal we have, or most dangerous animal we have around here, is maybe a coyote, or if you counter a raccoon. There's no big animals around here. But I remember when he climbed that tree and he looked down in that tree, he looked at me, he came down, he looked at me, and very quietly he says, I want you to start running to the house. And he ran behind me, and we ran as fast as we could up to the house. And it ended up, there was a mountain lion inside that tree. So whatever it was that was out in that woods was scaring me away from that tree. It wanted me out of that woods. And thinking back, my dad grabbed that shotgun. There was no reason for my dad to grab that shotgun. And unfortunately, he passed away. But I honestly think he knew something was out there too. I can't go back and I can't ask him, did you know about, Bigfoot being behind our house? Because it was just weird that he grabbed that shotgun. There was no reason for him because they all thought I had an imaginary friends, because I was so lonely. So, because I would always, be like, well, I have to take extra sandwiches with me to give to my friends, because I would leave them for them in that. The next experience that I can really think of, like the two that I told you about, where I feel like they saved my life. We had a huge barn. I'm talking those with that big red, farm barns. And it had tractors in it. It had a basement where we kept the cows. And a hay loft. There was a silo attached. And we had pigs in there. We had chickens in there. And I want to say I was about 11, 12 years old. And I was up on the second floor in the hayloft. And of course, I'm reading, just hanging out there. And it was summer vacation. And all of a sudden, the gates kept opening. And first it was the cows got out. And I remember, again, I didn't know what I was interacting with. But I remember being like, you need to stop it because I can't round these animals up. And my dad will get mad that they're out. And then all of a sudden I hear another, gate open. The pigs got out. And I'm like, what is going on? Then the door flew open and all the chickens got out. And I'm like, dude, I'm going to get in so much trouble. And I remember talking out loud to them, stop it. You're going to get me in so much trouble. I was like, there's no way I can get these animals back in by myself, And then I'm not going to say it was telepathic, because I don't know if it was that. But maybe I put it together that they wanted every animal out of that barn for some reason. And we had just had a mother cat that had kittens. So I got a bucket around and I got the kittens out and the cat out. So I was like, I remember yelling out to them, are you happy? All the animals are out and I'm going to get grounded and blah, blah, blah. I remember just going on and on to them about it. And then I sat back down, started reading my book. And then all of a sudden, a bucket came, flying over my head. And then, it got to the point a pitchfork came at me, but it didn't hit me, but it came very close to me. And I was like, oh, okay, so you want me out of here. So I was a very sensitive child, so I started crying and took off running, grabbed my stuff, took off running to the house, did not even get halfway up to the house. That whole entire barn collapsed. The earth shook. It was like cannons going off. It was so loud. And my dad, he worked maybe 3 miles down the road, and he had one of those big monster tire trucks, and you could hear the whoop, 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 on the pavement as it's coming. And I was on the other side of the house, so he didn't see me, and he knew I hung out in that barn a lot in the summer. And I remember he got out of that truck and all I heard him scream was, Tara, where is Tara? And I came around the house and I'm like, I'm right here. And he's like, oh, thank God you weren't in that barn. I was like, no. And he was like, I remember him rubbing his head and all the animals are dead. Oh my gosh, all the livestock's dead. And I was like, no, they're all out. And I remember he'd been looked at me. He's like, what do you mean they're all out? I was like, I let them all out. And I said I did it, because I knew that he wasn't going to believe me, that my imaginary friends, that's what they called them, told me, to let them all out and get the cats out and everything. But I remember he looked at me so strangely, and I remember he gave me a hug. He was like, I'm asking no questions. He was like, just thank God. But I just remember, those were two incidents that stuck in my head where they were watching over me. Probably the next experience after that was I had one sister and 3 brothers. And me and my brothers, we did not get along, just as brothers and sisters don't. And I did something to my brother that made him mad. So I remember he went up and took my radio and some trinkets and stuff that he knew that I cared about. And he took them out in the field and he buried them. And my mom told him to go dig them up. Well, he claimed he could not find where he buried them out in the field because it was out in the cornfield and the corn was probably about 5 foot high at the time. And I remember the next morning getting up, and on our patio in the middle was all the trinkets had been, uncovered, unburied, and put on our patio. And when I asked my brother, oh, you went and got those after all? He said, no, he did not get them. He does not know how they got there. And I just feel like there was a lot of times they looked out for me like that, This one was kind of going back in time. I apologize for that. I was probably around 8, 9 years old. It was the middle of winter. I want to say it was about 40 degrees out, and my parents were gone. My brothers were babysitting me, and they locked me out of the house. I had no shoes on, no socks. I was in shorts and a t-shirt. And I was out there probably for a good over 4 hours, huddled up by our water heater to try to stay warm. And I remember I fell asleep, probably was getting hypothermia, because I remember afterwards my parents had to take me to the hospital and they almost had to take 2 of my toes off. But when I woke up around the water heater, there was a blue tarp covering me. But I never got up to get a blue tarp. We had no neighbors around and they were older, so if they would have seen me, they wouldn't have put a tarp on me. They would have, taken me in. But I never woke up to see anything put that tarp on me. There was another time, again, I had no friends, loved animals, tried to collect every animal in the world. I had a pet squirrel for over a year that lived in my bedroom. There was many times my parents would wake up and get me out of bed and tell me I needed to get that dog out of the garage. And they were thinking, I put it there. It'd be like a neighbor's dog. One time it was a doctor's St. Bernard that lived over 8 miles away was in our garage. And someone would have had to open the door and put that animal in there. But it was never me. He was 8 miles away. I ended up getting $100 from that doctor, too, for finding that dog. But I didn't find it. My parents just blamed it on me. I guess my next incident would probably be because I grew up, started going to high school. I was in 3 sports, so I stopped hanging out outside and that. And so this was not really my incident. It was a friend was taking me home one night. My curfew was 12 o'clock, and she had dropped me off at my house and had drove away, was gone maybe 10 minutes. And we lived so far out in the country, we didn't lock our doors or anything like that. She came back about 10 minutes later, busted in our house screaming and crying. And she just kept saying, there is a naked monkey out there. There is a naked monkey out there, and I'm not driving home. And I remember my dad calming her down and she left her car at our house, and he had to take her home because she refused to drive. Because she was so scared of whatever it is that she saw. And I remember I've tried to talk to her about that sighting, and she refuses to talk about it. But she kept saying a naked monkey. So that to me tells me it was something in between, because of course a monkey's going to be naked. But I just remember, there's a huge naked monkey out there. I'm not driving home. She was pure panic. And so that leads up to my sighting, which I was 19. I was still living home with my parents, but I still had a 12 o'clock curfew. And I was coming home. I was about a half mile from the house, and the part in the road where I'm talking about, you have to come up to a bridge, and it goes over a pretty large ditch. And I had my brights on, and I saw a humanoid figure take one step and it was in the middle of the road. And then you could see it turn toward my car. So, of course, I had to slam on my brakes, and I was probably not even a foot away from it before I slowed down because I was speeding, trying to get home before curfew. And it bent over because it was looking toward my car, toward my windshield. It bent over and put both its hands on my hood, and it was looking down at my hood. And then it looked up at me, and we just stared at each other into each other's eyes. And this is, again, what I'm saying. I don't know if it was telepathic. I don't know what it was, or if I was just reading what its facial expression was looking like. But all I got from it was no aggression. It was almost sadness. And like, I just kept feeling like it was saying, I am still here. And it probably lasted only 10 seconds, but it felt like 10 minutes. Because then it just stood straight up, turned, and one step was off the road and was down in that ditch. And I remember, I wasn't scared when it happened. I was in shock. And I remember, I didn't speed off. I went so slow that half mile or so down the road. And I didn't start getting scared till I parked my car. Because I would have to get out and walk probably 50 paces to get inside. And we had no lights. It was pitch black out. That's when fear hit me, because I knew something was out there. And I remember going in, and the only thing I could say, I was 19, and you gotta remember where my eye was at. I just kept saying it was a monster, and it had the biggest hairy butt I have ever seen. Its glutes were just huge, and the muscle. And I was getting hysterical. My dad was trying to calm me down, and I could see its private region. And it was a man, and he did not have any clothes on, Dad, and of course that got him outraged because he's thinking there's, a perverted person out there. So he called the cops. And by the time they got the story out of me, they wrote the sighting off as a bear walking across the road, standing on its two hind feet. I live in northern Indiana. There is no bear here. I don't think there's ever been a bear here, except at a zoo. And honestly, I know what I saw. I looked it right in the face. And that's why I remember being so upset that they wouldn't believe me. And I was more upset at my dad because my dad was like, just let the police officer do his job. And he kept shushing me down. And he wouldn't let me talk about it afterwards because he said people would think I was crazy. The whole face seemed pretty flat. It had a very short forehead, grayish skin. I could see the wrinkles in the forehead, though. Big, round eyes. But like I said, they looked like gentle eyes. They weren't piercing or anything. They were big and round. It had a very wide nose. I didn't see the teeth. Its mouth was shut, but straight across. But it had pretty big lips. It was a blackish, grayish color, I want to say. But it was very dark out, too. And the only lights were the car lights. But like I said, the car, I had the brights on. So I could see a lot. It was probably about 7 foot tall. It wasn't girthy. It was tall and lanky. I'm not going to say it was skinny. It was more like a basketball build. But it had really broad shoulders. It would probably be about 10 years ago. I went to go stay with my brother for about a week, and he only lived probably 3 miles away from where that experience when I was 19 happened. It was a little bit further into the country. And we had a bonfire at night, and he had lost his keys. And we looked everywhere around that bonfire for the keys. We looked on the porch. We looked in the house. We looked everywhere for his keys. And finally we gave up. We went to bed. And when we got up the next morning, his keys were laying, like as soon as you walked out of his front door, in the middle of his porch, his keys were just laying there perfectly in the middle. And of course, my brother's like, things like this are always happening, sis. It's so weird out here. He's like, things come up missing, and then they just come back. And then he had 3 pit bulls, and they were digging at something in the yard. And when we walked over there, you could see 2 like barefoot footprints. Like you could make out the toes, the heel, everything perfectly. And then I remember him asking me, he was like, what did you see that one time, sis? You know? And I told him, and he was like, I'm starting to believe they're real, Tara. He was like, there's too much weird stuff that goes on out here. But that's the only thing that I experienced at his house.
My Bigfoot sightings happened in Gulf County, Florida. My name is Derek. I'm originally from Sarasota, Florida. Kind of a smaller, concrete jungle. Can't really say small. Fairly large city, but a concrete jungle compared to where I am now in little Weehawken, Florida in the Gulf County. I used to come up here every year with my dad. My dad was a snake breeder and wild collector for the pet trade. And I've had all kinds of reptiles from all around the world. We spent most of our summer nights, spring and summer nights, hunting for snakes, believe it or not. Once a year, usually in mid-June, we would come up to Gulf County here to hunt particular snakes that you don't find otherwise in the state. We did all kinds of stuff while we were here. We'd fish on the river, hang out with friends during the day when we weren't hunting snakes. Met a lot of people. I now own a property from some older couple that we'd hung out with when I was younger up here. Started coming up here when I was 8 years old. First thing wasn't a physical sighting. Not far from where I live, less than a 5-minute drive, there's a road. Not sure that I should drop names or anything. I guess it doesn't matter. There's a road nearby me, Jarrett Daniels Road, major road between my major road, even though we're in a very desolate area where we're at, and another major highway that runs into Panama City, Florida. Used to be the first end of it closest to my house was paved, but then it was a dirt road all the way across to the other side. Not far beyond the last house, the dirt started going towards Highway 22. And one year we were up here snake hunting. We had just stopped not long before that for a small banded water snake. And we jumped back in the truck, and we used to stop for snake crawl marks occasionally to check out which direction they were going in. Sometimes the snake hadn't moved very far off the road. We'd take a quick look around. So one night we see what we think is a snake crawl mark, and we stop. And these are sugar sandy roads. We jump out of the truck with the flashlights and whatnot. It's not really that long after dark, less than an hour probably. And we walk up on what we think is going to be a snake crawl mark. And it turned out to be very large footprints. I'm going to take a guess, 15 to 17 inches long, 5-6 inches wide, maybe. I could see the look in my dad's eyes. He walked up and started studying what he was looking at, and very shock and awe. Pretty interesting moment. And then when I finally realized, why he's in this state, we're looking at it and realizing it's gigantic footprints. We do have pictures of them. They're probably somewhere here in the house. Those old film cameras come with sleeves of pictures after you get them developed or whatever. I'm sure they're in one of those sleeves somewhere. We had developed them at some point or another, and brought them up the subsequent year, showed them to a friend of ours that lived in White City, Florida here, old snake hunter and antiques dealer in the area who no longer lives here. Older man, maybe dead now, moved to Pensacola last I knew, to his sister's place. And he lived here his whole life. He did share some paranormal stories with us, which did not involve a Bigfoot sighting at all. He wanted to believe that what the footprints were was a bear running across the road, because they bring their feet together as they run. I guess one might try to conclude that maybe he just wanted to write off what we had saw. Pictures don't do it as much justice as looking at it, physically, especially when the pictures were taken at night under flash. But from what I remember staring at as a probably 10-year-old child at that time, I don't believe it was a bear that ran across the road where 2 feet had come together as it would have strided across the road, or whatever you want to say. I believe, based on what I remember seeing, the outline of the footprint, even in the sugar sand, wasn't broken on the edges or anything like that. I do believe it was a large, solid footprint, multiples going across the road. But that was my very first, ever evidence of seeing something like that. I've always kind of been into aliens and ghosts and cryptids and things like that, even as a young child. But up until that point, never actually thought I'd see anything like that. Probably 2 years later, we are driving down what is paved on 2 sides, but a dirt in the middle, very long road between the physical city of Weewa. Near the Chipola River, there's a boat ramp at the end of the main road that this road is off of, called Gaskin. There's a little public park there. Road's called Iola. It runs all the way across to Scotts Ferry, an area called Scotts Ferry. There's a campground there, volunteer fire department, stuff like that. The road is paved more on the further end where this sighting had took place, but at that point in time, it was still dirt at that area. It's still dirt in the middle at a point, but it's paved further inward towards the middle of the road now. No houses in this particular area. You're still 2 or 3 miles off of coming up on the houses on the farther end of what was the paved road at that point in time. We're coming back in the direction going back towards Weewa-Hitchcock. And, my dad doesn't have the greatest eyes in the world. Usually would wear glasses or contacts or whatever. But due to that, he doesn't look out as far in front of the truck as I do while we're snake hunting. And in this particular night, a kid native to the area, was with us, a kid named Anthony, son of a family we had befriended up here and hung out with all the time and stuff during the day while we weren't snake hunting, and late at night after we were done snake hunting. So we're cruising down the road, and my dad doesn't see it at all, but a large, upright, ape-like creature, maybe 150 foot in front of the truck, runs across the road. Very interesting looking animal, reddish brown color, possibly some gray if that didn't have to do with the lighting of the truck. Hunched over, I'm going to say in its hunched over state, 6.5 foot tall, possibly if it was fully, erect or whatever you want to say, maybe 7 or better feet tall. So this thing runs in front of the truck, and I immediately go, "Whoa, did you see that?" And Anthony did, in fact, see it as well. My dad's like, what are you talking about? What did you see? And I was like, dude, seriously, a Bigfoot just ran in front of the truck. He did not see that. And of course, he didn't see it. So we had stopped shortly afterwards, and he had got out. At the time, I wasn't crazy fearful. I was with my dad, a man's man kind of guy. I'm a young kid, I'm trusting in my dad's safety. Anthony did get out with us. His parents, I believe, were actually cruising kind of opposite of us on the same road, just kind of helping us try to find some snakes. We had got out to see if we could see tracks, to verify what I had claimed to have seen. But where it had run across the road, it didn't leave tracks. It was more like a shuffle, like it didn't lift its feet. More or less shuffled across the road. And as it ran, hunched over, as I was saying, it had the very classic, arms longer than its knees, swinging back and forth pretty decently. Definitely I didn't get a good look at its face. It was a total, side view of the animal, or whatever you want to call it. Just an awe-striking moment. We checked out what turned out to be the scuffle of marks across the road and jumped back in the truck. Didn't go too far, maybe 200-300 yards up the road, and there's a eastern checkered garter snake in the road. And generally, I would jump out to just grab the snakes on my own terms. And I was like, I want to see you catch that one. I was like, I don't know about that. You want to get out there and catch this one, Dad? So, but, not crazy fearful or anything, but wary to go out there by myself. Not even that far from the truck by any means. But that's pretty much that particular sighting. I guess, I continued to go out in the woods and stuff, no problem at all. I guess I always have that lingering thought in the back of my mind, that I could see something like that again. Based on the second sighting, I don't necessarily think they're that aggressive in all cases, at least, even though I was pretty scared during the second sighting because I was by myself. But I went out in the woods, the swamp rather, near Anthony's house. We looked for crawfish and turtles and snakes and stuff during the daytime. And other than that lingering thought in the back of my mind, really didn't worry about it a whole lot. I still go out in the swamps to these days. I'm now a forager and whatnot. I forage wild fruits like persimmons and hunt chanterelle mushrooms and boletes and things like that, medicinal mushrooms. So I don't let it drive me out of the woods by any means. Still something I love to do. I passed on the snake hunting tradition to my children. My daughter's still very young, but she'll hold a snake, and my wife still won't after 18 years. Son will catch him. He's 16, and all that good stuff. But anyways, the second sighting, still not very far from my house. There's a road not but a few miles from my house that cuts across between my major road, which is Highway 386, also known as Overstreet to the locals. That's the main drag between Weehawken and Mexico Beach. The road's called Road 20. It's also called Roberts Landing Road. A very large dirt road. Takes you close to a half an hour to drive across to White City, where our friend Jack lived. But one year we were staying at Jack's house. We used to rent at a hotel that no longer exists here in town. It was called Big B's at one point in time. Switched to a name called Swampy's at a different point in time. It's now a buy right drugstore. And so we were staying at Jack's house this particular year. This is probably 2 years after that first physical sighting. Maybe the subsequent year, probably 2 years after. My dad had drug our four-wheeler up here. He had a Honda 400 Sports Tracks, not an automatic, a manual. Wasn't very great at driving it yet. Very first time I'd actually went out driving at a different location in Sarasota where we lived. I'd actually crashed into a ditch. But that being said, we'd brought it up here that one year, and we're staying at Jack's house at the far end of Road 20 in White City. I decided one day that I was going to get out on the four-wheeler and ride out into the road during the daytime. But like I said, very long road, takes a good long time to travel across it. We're usually cruising slow, 30 miles an hour or whatever. And it takes you a good while to get across. So I'm riding this four-wheeler, maybe third to halfway-ish out into the woods. It was all paper pine plantation here, the original woods that was here probably a very long time ago, 150 years ago or whatever, had been logged over and over again. St. Joe Paper Company had owned all the land here and replanted, paper pine trees in perfect straight rows. So it's just a giant wilderness of paper pines that's now been bought by the Mormon Church. It's converting a lot of the land into cow fields, and some of it's being replanted in paper pine. But all those years ago, still owned by the St. Joe Paper Company. Their facility wasn't operating here anymore. The paper mill had moved over to Panama City, Florida at that point in time. And I'm riding down the road pretty far out there by myself on a four-wheeler that I'm not the greatest at working. And I'm just staring down the perfect rows of trees as I cruise along, enjoying myself. Maybe I could run into certain snakes in the middle of the day, hognose snakes, black racers, rattlesnakes, as opposed to most of the stuff we'd look for is usually in the early mornings and evenings, rat snakes, king snakes, and stuff like that. So I'm passing a particular, row of trees, and as I'm looking down, there's a massive figure standing front side to me, 200 foot off the road, maybe. I would say it had to have been brownish, close to 7 foot tall. It was in full shade of all these large trees. So I can't get a totally accurate description of its color, height and stuff, no problem. I could see it well, just it's in the shade, the darkness of the trees. But very much could tell what it was for sure. So in a, almost like time stopping, wave of fear coming on, like, holy stuff, I'm out here by myself. I quickly try to swing the four-wheeler around to go back the other direction to where safety would be. And in this fury to try to do so, I stalled the four-wheeler without hardly getting but turned around. And I'm shaking crazy and freaking out, really. Mostly, I guess, due to being by myself, being with my dad and in a vehicle and stuff during the first one. Very interesting, but just not that level of fear by any means. I gave it several tries. I couldn't feather out the clutch. Just freaking out too bad. I kept stalling it over and over again, not making it more than a foot or two at a time. So I could hear the pine needles and stuff crunching out there in the woods. And I don't think it was coming towards me. I do think it was moving kind of parallel to the road. But in this state of fear, I get off the four-wheeler, and I'm trying to look between the trees, and I'm not seeing it, but I'm still hearing it. And I couldn't lay eyes on it again, maybe hiding somehow from my sight. There's other brush and stuff growing between some of the lanes and whatnot of the trees. So I start screaming into the woods, all kinds of choice words, even as a probably 12, 13-year-old child, maybe 14, just flat out screaming at the woods. And after a minute or two of doing that, I decided I better try to get on the four-wheeler and just go. So I got on it, and after 3 or 4 tries, I finally got it to go, and I cruised on out of there and never went back out there again by myself on that four-wheeler. And that's pretty much that. Like I said, I'm a short, sweet, and to the point kind of guy. Nothing paranormal at all about the Bigfoot sightings. Obviously they didn't disappear or whatever. What I saw, I believe to be flesh and blood. I do these days after watching many, many videos, reading many, many things, studying other cryptids and things like that. I do believe there is potentially some paranormal aspects to them, but for the little that I did get to observe them, absolutely no paranormal activity from my physical sightings at all. That said, there is a lot of sightings near Sarasota, Florida, particularly in the Mayaca City region, as far as I know. My dad's girlfriend owns a property. Her family's owned it for years, getting out towards Arcadia down State Road 72 from Sarasota, Florida. And they own a property at a place called Horse Creek. Throw a couple big parties out there every year with all their childhood friends, family. There could be, 60 to 100 people there any given year, twice a year usually. Riding four-wheelers through the woods, desolate area, not far from another road we used to snake hunt out there called Seidel Road. One night she's coming home from her property out there. I think if I remember correctly, it's probably like 11 o'clock at night. And she's cruising down State Road 72, pretty close to the mouth of Seidel Road, where I snake hunted many times as a younger man. And this thing's just straight walking down the road. And full faith and credit in this woman. If she said she saw it, I believe it. My dad's been with her for probably over 20 years. Good person, loving person. Just not going to tell any BS. And I do believe she saw something out there, as well as I guess other people have as well. A different story. My dad and his buddy, obviously reptile collectors, used to go down by Lake Okeechobee to a place they called the Jungle. Not sure why it's called that. That's just something they named it. I had never stepped foot there before. Back when they did it more often, I was very young, talking 5, 6, 7 years old. And they would go down there in the middle of the night and hunt through this wooded area that, like I said, they called the Jungle. And you'd carry a box, sealed up or whatever, but with a hole big enough to put your thumb in. And you'd walk through the woods at night because the lizards would sleep on the leaves and branches of the trees, and you could just walk up and pluck them like they were cherries off the plants. And you'd pull your thumb out real quick, shove a lizard in the box, and keep on going. And then back then, they'd probably get like 25 cents a piece for a lizard, and you could go out there and screw around in the woods all night and come home with 400 lizards of three different kinds. These green anoles and the invasive brown anoles, skinks, things like that. And then sell them wholesale to different reptile dealers. We used to sell them to a place called Silver City Serpentarium, which I have no idea if they're still in business or not now. I'm pretty sure they're not. But in recent years, Alan had passed away probably close to a year ago now from a heart attack. But maybe a year prior to that, my dad and him had gone down to the jungle, and they'd never had any experiences that were out of the ordinary there before. And him and my dad walking through there with flashlights at night, collecting lizards and the occasional snake, potentially yellow rat snake, horn snake, or whatever you might run across there in the middle of the night. They're walking through there, and my dad's hearing growling noises all around him. They both are. No matter how hard they try, they can't put a flashlight on it. Seems to be going all around them, like you'd hear it in front of you at one point, and then in the blink of an eye, it's behind you to the side of you. And they couldn't for the life of them get a glimpse of what was going on, just that they did not feel welcome. They did not feel like they should be there, and couldn't get a sighting at all of whatever was bothering them out there that night. And of course, it freaked both of them out to some extent or another. And these are, man's men kind of guys that are used to being in the woods, love nature, hunt, things like that. And to freak them out bad enough, that makes you question wanting to go back. It's pretty interesting in and of itself. But for whatever reason, not long after that, Alan goes back out there by himself and has an experience. If I remember the story correctly, and I can get it from my dad again since Alan's no longer around to tell the tale, he encountered three creatures relatively face to face, within feet of him, maybe 5 to 10 foot. I don't know. They got pretty close up on him, if I remember correctly. Furred humanoid creatures larger than him, and he's not a small guy. He said they had red glowing eyes, and he would describe them to be demons, not necessarily the average Sasquatch by any means, but Sasquatch-like in appearance, according to him anyways, and freaked him out so bad that he had pledged he was never going back there again. And my dad, after having the experience they had together not long before that, he's like, dude, no, we need to go out there and we need to check it out. But Alan refused to do it. And before he had died, he could not be convinced to go back out there. And then, not long ago, several weeks back, my dad and his girlfriend had drove down to the lake there and tried to find the jungle. Alan had always led the way, driving or whatever, to the spot. My dad was pretty sure he knew where it was, by himself or whatever, but wasn't 100%. And they're pretty sure they found the area where that was, but now it is under construction and being torn apart. So that particular area no longer exists as far as I know. But just an interesting tale from another guy I have absolute full faith and credit in. Another guy I believe to have the proclivity to see things, though I think that was his only, I guess I could say, Sasquatch-like encounter. He's had several other interesting encounters in his day, UFOs and things like that. It's probably not the craziest stories you've ever heard, or whatever. Just here to give a testimony about something I saw. They're definitely here. I'm not the only one who's seen them. They're definitely out there. And I just wanted to tell my story. It's a bit more on the mundane side. I understand that. It happened a long time ago as a kid. I'm 36 years old now, doing my own thing and whatever. Still in my mind, still think about it when I'm out there in the woods by myself. It's not a major bother, but I guess I could say I'm a bit more vigilant. But and I've now lived here in Weewaw daily for a little over 8 years, and haven't yet seen another one. Not sure I ever will, but I'm certainly in their territory, and someday I do hope to see one again. And perhaps I'd like to hope my children and wife are there to see it with me. But I don't know what else I can say about it.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah, the sound of a memory brings me back to the bluegrass playing on my dad's 8-track. His pickup man had been through it, getting through the day on Scruggs and Skags, booking hay bales to those Tennessee jams. There's no other way that I'd do it. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the drumming on Kentucky style. Those are the anthems strumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Pace of the city life drives me wild. The only tune is the cars rushing by, with the bass on the stereos booming. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the drumming on Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Something going backwards and double time, getting to the soul and the drumming on Kentucky style. Those are the anthems drumming out, country boy living. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm, ride chicken porch swing, mama's best sweet tea kind of sound.